There's a moment, subtle, almost invisible, when people realize the INFJ in front of them is not like everyone else. It doesn't happen through loud words or dramatic gestures. It happens in silence, in observation, in the way an INFJ sees something no one else noticed and says it calmly as if it were obvious all along. And suddenly, the room shifts. The energy recalibrates. People feel exposed, understood, or unexpectedly safe, sometimes all at once. The difference isn't volume, it's depth. It's the way INFJs respond after listening longer than most would tolerate. It's the way they name an emotional truth that others were circling but couldn't articulate. And in that moment, people realize this isn't just another personality in the room. This is someone operating on a different internal frequency. By the end of this video, you'll recognize the exact moments when that realization happens, the quiet signals, the behavioral shifts, the subtle respect that appears without announcement.
So stay with me, and when you recognize one of these moments from your own life, comment one word: different.
This is Brainy Wise, where we decode the psychology behind the quiet minds that see more than they show. When they say something simple that suddenly reframes the entire situation.
A single sentence.
Calm voice. No drama. And suddenly the room shifts. What was chaos becomes clarity.
What felt complicated becomes obvious. The argument that spiraled for 20 minutes dissolves in 10 quiet words.
An INFJ does not raise their tone, does not dominate the space, does not compete for attention.
They wait.
They listen. They observe the emotional undercurrent beneath the surface conversation. And then they speak, not to react, but to reveal.
Their words are not loud, but they land with precision.
They don't add noise, they remove it.
And in that removal, everyone feels the truth reorganize itself.
It's unsettling at first. People look at each other, recalibrating.
How did they see that so quickly?
How did they cut through all the assumptions, defensiveness, and ego without attacking anyone? The INFJ doesn't reframe by arguing facts. They reframe by identifying meaning. They sense the invisible tension holding the situation together and gently expose it. Suddenly, the problem isn't about what was said, it's about what was feared. It isn't about who is right, it's about who feels unheard. They name the emotional core no one wanted to admit existed. And once it's named, the illusion collapses. Not with confrontation, with understanding. What makes this moment powerful isn't intelligence alone, it's timing. INFJs rarely interrupt. They let others exhaust their narratives first. They allow the storm to reveal its shape. And when they finally speak, it feels less like an opinion and more like a revelation. That's the moment people realize something is different. Not because the INFJ dominates the conversation, but because they quietly transform it. A simple sentence becomes a turning point. A calm observation becomes a mirror. And the room understands, almost reluctantly, that clarity just entered, and it came from the quietest person there. When they stay calm while everyone else reacts emotionally. Stillness in the storm. Controlled breathing while voices rise. Steady eyes while tension spikes. That is the moment people begin to notice something different. The room tightens with emotion, anger flashes, defensiveness sharpens, insecurity leaks into tone and posture. Reactions bounce from person to person like sparks searching for fuel. And in the center of it, the INFJ does not ignite. They do not escalate. They do not compete for dominance. Their calm is not detachment from reality, it is immersion beneath it. While others react to volume, they track motive. While others defend ego, they analyze patterns. The contrast becomes impossible to ignore. What unsettles people is not the calm itself,
It's the control behind it.
Most individuals ride the first emotional wave that hits them.
INFJs wait for the second and third wave, watching how the energy shifts.
They are not suppressing reaction. They are processing it internally at high speed.
They map the emotional terrain while others are still throwing words. They recognize fear beneath aggression, insecurity beneath arrogance, confusion beneath outrage. And because they understand what drives the explosion, they refuse to mirror it.
Their silence doesn't signal weakness. It signals awareness. The louder the room becomes, the quieter they grow, not shrinking, but stabilizing. Eventually, the emotional storm exhausts itself.
The reactions lose momentum. People glance toward the INFJ, sensing the grounded presence that never wavered. That's when the realization lands. While everyone else was swept away by impulse, the INFJ was observing, calculating, and waiting for clarity. Their calm becomes the anchor the room unconsciously gravitates toward.
It reframes the chaos without confrontation.
It diffuses tension without performance. And in that stillness, people recognize something rare, strength that doesn't need noise to prove itself. When they understand someone's hidden motive without needing proof, instant clarity, silent recognition, pattern before evidence. That is the shift people feel before they can explain it. There is no accusation, no dramatic confrontation, no demand for confession. Just a subtle change in the INFJ's eyes, a recalibration. While others wait for hard proof, for receipts and confirmation, the INFJ has already connected the emotional fragments. A compliment that felt slightly delayed. A pause that lasted half a second too long. A tone that carried more calculation than warmth. The details are small, almost invisible to everyone else, but together they form a complete psychological picture. The motive reveals itself not through words, but through the alignment or misalignment between energy and intention. What surprises people most is that the INFJ doesn't need validation to trust what they sense. There is no frantic search for evidence, no external reassurance. Their certainty forms quietly, internally, like a lock clicking into place. They do not rush to expose what they see. They observe. They allow behavior to unfold naturally, not to prove themselves right, but to confirm the pattern they already detected. The manipulator thinks they are ahead. The opportunist believes their charm is working. But the INFJ is no longer engaging from innocence. They are engaging from awareness. The emotional temperature changes subtly. Access narrows. Responses become measured. And the other person feels it without understanding why.
That is the moment realization dawns.
It's not about being accused, it's about being seen. Truly seen.
The INFJ doesn't confront immediately, because confrontation is unnecessary when clarity already exists.
They adjust instead.
They withdraw emotional investment.
They redirect energy.
And when someone senses that their hidden agenda has been silently understood, respect mixes with unease.
There is no dramatic exposure, no public unmasking. Just a calm internal conclusion that shifts everything.
And in that quiet certainty, people realize they are standing in front of someone who doesn't need proof to know the truth. When they remember details others forgot and connect them into a pattern, nothing is random. Nothing is lost. Every small detail stays stored.
That's the moment people begin to feel it.
While others let conversations fade into background noise, the INFJ archives fragments with quiet precision. A phrase someone used months ago. A contradiction in a story told twice. A subtle shift in tone during what seemed like an ordinary exchange.
These details don't sit isolated. They rest like puzzle pieces, waiting for alignment. And when a new piece appears, the connection happens instantly. The INFJ doesn't just remember, they synthesize. What looked harmless alone becomes revealing when placed beside something forgotten. The pattern forms silently, complete before anyone else realizes there was one forming at all. People often underestimate this ability because it looks like good memory on the surface. It isn't memory, it's integration. The INFJ doesn't collect data for control or leverage. They collect it because their mind instinctively seeks coherence. When someone says, "I never said that," the INFJ recalls not only the words, but the emotional climate surrounding them. When behavior contradicts intention, they recognize the shift immediately because the earlier baseline is still vivid. This is why they rarely confront impulsively. They wait. They observe. They allow the pattern to confirm itself. And when it does, their understanding feels less like suspicion and more like certainty. That's when the realization hits the other person. The INFJ casually references something long forgotten, linking it to the present in a way that reframes everything. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just calmly. The room shifts because the timeline suddenly makes sense. Motives that seemed ambiguous now look consistent. Excuses collapse under continuity. The INFJ doesn't accuse, they connect. And in that connection lies their quiet power. People realize they are not dealing with someone who reacts to isolated events, but someone who sees the entire narrative arc. The past is never truly past in the INFJ's mind. It is context. And when context becomes clarity, the illusion of randomness disappears. When people feel deeply seen after a short conversation, it happens quickly. Too quickly to explain. A few exchanged sentences, a pause, a question that lands slightly deeper than expected, and suddenly the other person feels exposed in a way that isn't threatening, just accurate. The INFJ isn't interrogating or digging aggressively. They're listening with full presence. They notice the hesitation before a word is chosen, the micro-expression that flickers when a topic shifts, the subtle tension behind a rehearsed answer. And instead of reacting to the surface, they respond to the layer beneath it. That's when the shift happens. The conversation moves from polite to personal without force. The other person feels understood in a way they didn't consciously ask for. What makes it powerful is the precision. The INFJ doesn't flood the interaction with advice or analysis. They reflect one sentence back, slightly reframed, slightly clarified, and it lands with unexpected weight. It sounds like you're not angry, you're disappointed, or you don't seem confused, you seem tired. Simple observations, but they cut through emotional noise. The other person pauses because they recognize the truth instantly. It feels like being translated correctly for the first time. And because the INFJ delivers this insight calmly, without judgment or drama, defenses lower naturally. The person begins to share more, not because they were persuaded, but because they feel safe.
That is the moment people realize something is different. The INFJ didn't dominate the conversation. They didn't overshare or impress. They simply perceived. And in that perception, they created emotional clarity. Afterward, the other person often leaves thinking, how did they understand me so fast? The interaction may have lasted 10 minutes, yet it lingers far longer. Being seen is rare. Being seen accurately is rarer. And when someone experiences that level of recognition without pressure or performance, it creates respect that doesn't need to be announced. It becomes felt. When silence from the INFJ feels more powerful than words. Silence shifts the air, not awkward, not empty, intentional. When an INFJ stops speaking, the room subtly recalibrates. It isn't withdrawal. It isn't uncertainty. It is awareness consolidating itself. Others may rush to fill quiet with explanations, jokes, or defensiveness, but the INFJ does not compete with noise. They observe. Their stillness carries evaluation without accusation, presence without performance, and people feel it immediately. The absence of reaction becomes the loudest signal in the interaction. It forces reflection. It removes emotional clutter. It creates a mirror without saying a single word. What makes that silence powerful is the timing. INFJs don't go quiet randomly. They go quiet when something meaningful has surfaced, a contradiction, a hidden motive, a tension others are pretending not to notice. Instead of confronting impulsively, they pause. That pause communicates discernment. It suggests that something important has just been understood. The other person senses it and becomes hyper-aware of themselves. They replay what they just said. They analyze their tone. They wonder what was detected. The silence feels active, not passive. It carries psychological weight because it signals processing at a depth others aren't accustomed to witnessing. And in that moment, people recognize difference. Most individuals try to assert power through volume, argument, or emotional intensity. The INFJ does the opposite. They hold space so steadily that others feel exposed without being attacked. Their quiet becomes authority. Their restraint becomes influence. Afterward, people often remember the pause more than any spoken sentence. It lingers. It unsettles. It commands respect without demanding it. That is when realization happens. This is not someone who reacts. This is someone who understands. And when silence communicates more than confrontation ever could, the dynamic changes permanently. When they withdraw quietly and the emotional atmosphere changes instantly, energy shifts. Conversation thins. Something subtle disappears. When an INFJ withdraws, it rarely comes with confrontation or announcement. There is no dramatic exit, no raised voice, no visible anger. They simply reduce their presence. Their responses shorten. Their eyes observe instead of engage. Their emotional current, once warm and steady, retracts inward, and the room feels it before anyone consciously understands what just happened. Laughter sounds slightly forced. Dialogue loses depth. The invisible thread that was holding the emotional space together quietly dissolves. What makes this moment powerful is contrast. INFJs are often the quiet stabilizers in social dynamics, the ones who absorb tension, smooth over friction, and subtly attune to everyone's internal state. When they pull back, that stabilizing force vanishes. People who relied on their grounding feel unanchored. Conversations become less fluid. Subtle insecurities rise to the surface. Some may try to regain attention with humor or dominance. Others grow unusually reflective, sensing that something important has shifted. The withdrawal is not hostile. It is controlled. And that control makes it unmistakable. It signals that an internal line has been crossed, evaluated, and resolved without external drama. The realization comes later, often in hindsight. Someone notices the absence of depth in the interaction. They recognize that the emotional temperature dropped the moment the INFJ disengaged. It becomes clear that the INFJ was never just there. They were holding space, balancing energy, quietly influencing the tone of every exchange. Once that influence is removed, the difference is undeniable. That is when people understand that the INFJ's presence was never passive. It was active, stabilizing, and intentional. And when they withdraw quietly, The silence they leave behind speaks louder than any argument ever could. When their boundaries appear suddenly firm and non-negotiable, softness disappears, access narrows, the tone changes. One moment they are patient, understanding, adaptable. The next, there is a line you cannot cross. No anger, no explanation, just clarity. INFJs do not build boundaries loudly. They build them internally, layer by layer, long before anyone notices. They observe patterns, weigh intent, and measure emotional cost. They forgive quietly. They adjust repeatedly. But when the internal threshold is reached, the shift is immediate and unmistakable. What once felt flexible becomes solid. What once felt open becomes sealed. The firmness is not impulsive. It is accumulated. Every overlooked comment, every dismissed need, every subtle disrespect has been processed and stored. While others assume everything is fine because conflict never surfaced, the INFJ has been recalibrating privately. By the time the boundary becomes visible, the decision has already matured. That is why it feels sudden to everyone else. The warmth is still there, but it no longer extends beyond the line. Their voice becomes measured. Their availability decreases. Their emotional openness retracts to a controlled distance. Attempts to negotiate are met with calm repetition, not escalation. This is what unsettles people most, the absence of emotional drama. There is no fight to win, no reaction to manipulate, only a steady refusal to bend. The realization arrives in the silence that follows. People sense that something permanent has shifted. The INFJ, who once tolerated ambiguity, now operates with precision. The door is not slammed. It is simply closed. And because there was no warning display of anger, the firmness feels absolute. It forces reflection. It removes confusion. It reveals that kindness was never weakness. It was patience. And patience, once exhausted, transforms into boundaries that do not move. That is the moment people understand that the INFJ's quiet nature was never a lack of strength. It was strength held in reserve, released only when alignment demands it. When others seek their perspective before making important decisions, they ask. They pause. They wait for the INFJ to speak. It does not happen loudly. No announcement declares their authority. Yet in crucial moments, career shifts, relationship crossroads, moral dilemmas, eyes turn toward them. Not because the INFJ demands influence, but because their perspective carries weight that feels rare. People sense that when an INFJ speaks, it will not be impulsive opinion or surface-level advice. It will be insight shaped by quiet observation, emotional intelligence, and pattern recognition others missed. That silent reputation builds over time. One accurate read, one reframing comment, one moment where their calm clarity cuts through confusion. Gradually, others begin to rely on that depth. What makes it powerful is restraint. INFJs do not offer their perspective constantly. They listen first. They absorb context. They consider emotional consequences and long-term impact before responding. When they finally speak, the words feel measured, almost surgical. They do not overwhelm with details. They deliver one angle no one else saw. A hidden motive, a potential outcome, a moral implication. And suddenly, the entire situation shifts. The person seeking advice feels grounded, as if fog has cleared. That is when admiration quietly forms. Not loud praise, Not dramatic acknowledgement, but a subtle dependence on their clarity. People begin to consult them before decisions because experience has taught them something simple. The INFJ sees what others overlook. Over time, this pattern becomes unmistakable. In meetings, in friendships, in private conversations, someone inevitably says, "What do you think?" The room stills slightly. It is not about dominance. It is about trust. The INFJ's perspective feels anchored, steady, free from ego-driven bias. Others sense that the advice given will consider both logic and emotional reality. And in that moment, the difference becomes clear. The INFJ is not just participating in life's decisions, they are shaping them quietly, without demanding recognition. Their influence is subtle but decisive. People realize they are different when their voice becomes the one that steadies uncertainty and guides direction, even when they never asked for that power. And that's the quiet truth most people never articulate. The INFJ doesn't need to dominate a room to shape it. They don't chase authority, yet authority gravitates toward them. They don't demand attention, yet their absence shifts the emotional gravity instantly. What makes them different isn't volume or visibility. It's depth, restraint, and the rare ability to see beneath the surface without announcing it. The moment people start seeking their perspective before acting, everything changes. Respect replaces curiosity. Trust replaces doubt. And the INFJ steps into influence without ever trying to. If this felt familiar, if you've noticed people turning to you for clarity, even when you stayed quiet, then you understand the pattern. Now I want to hear from you. What was the exact moment someone realized you were different? Write one word in the comments that describes how it felt when you noticed your perspective carried weight. And if you resonate with this depth-driven insight, stay connected, because on Brainy, we don't just describe INFJs. We decode them.